Hello, and thank you for joining us today in our studies of Second Kings. Today we're in Second Kings chapter 22, and here we're going to deal specifically with King Josiah. There's a number of things that we're going to talk about today when it comes to King Josiah and the attributes that he has. But recognize that chapter 22 is not going to be the entirety of King Josiah's life. It's a summary of one particular aspect. And there's going to be more to come when it comes to Josiah's actions and what Josiah does. And so as we come into chapter 22 today, we really kind of have the introduction to the character of King Josiah. So what do we see? Well, first we begin in verses 1 and 2 as we are introduced to Josiah. We find that he is going to be one who is going to be described as walking in the ways of his father David. That he does what is right in the sight of the Lord. And the additional statement that is made at the end of verse 2 is very important. He did not turn to the right hand or to the left. In other words, he stayed on what we would commonly call the straight and narrow. He was not one who was going to swerve back and forth. He was not one who was unsteady, but rather he was one that could be trusted to make the right choice, to do the right thing, and to have the right heart. Remember, when it talks about being a servant of God after the manner of David, it's not that David was perfect and that David always did the right thing, but rather David's heart was always such that he would be one who would do what God commanded, and that when he made mistakes, when he committed sins, he fixed them, and he repented of them, and he sought to do what was right. That is the heart that Josiah has. Now, it is interesting that Josiah is going to take the throne at the age of 8. He is going to be but a boy when he becomes king. He is not necessarily going to reign from day one with full regency of the kingdom, but at the same token, he is going to be the king. And so the direction that the kingdom is going to take is going to be highly determinant upon how he reacts to things and how he deals with things. He is going to grow up, or he is going to come into the kingdom having watched his father be murdered, and having at the same time sat at the feet of his grandfather. There has been a great deal of strife and turmoil in this young boy's 8 years worth of life. And yet, he is going to be one who comes out of it serving God, and who comes out of it with a trust in God. As you delve a little deeper into the chapter, the core of what you find in this chapter is going to center around some renovations that are going on to the temple and repairs that are taking place to the temple. And it is an amazing thing to see that as they're doing these repairs, you have a situation where they find the book of the law. Now, this is basically the priestly copy of the law of Moses. It has been lost in the temple. Remember, you have had times over the last 50, 60 years where there have been enormous damages done to the temple. You have all kinds of idolatrous gods that have been set up in the temple. You have all kinds of removals of God's plan that have taken place when it comes to the confines of the temple and its grounds. And so you have, as they're going through and doing this, a location where the book of the law had been hidden or had just been put away, and it had been left and forgotten about. Even the priests didn't know where it was. And they get it and they bring it to Josiah. Now we'll get to Josiah's reaction in a moment, but I want you to think for just a minute about how much we take for granted having access to God's Word today. You know, the book of the law was their copies of Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. It was their copy of what God expected them to do in order to be right in his sight. And at the time that it's brought to Josiah, Josiah has never heard it before. He's never had access to it before. and even the priests have not had access. They've had the instruction handed down from year upon year. They have had access to what they've been told, but not to actually see it for themselves. We take for granted that we have Bibles at our fingertips anywhere we want them. We can have them on any kind of electronic device. We have copies of them all over the place. We have all of these different things at our disposal. What do we do with them? Do we actually read them? Do we actually take the time to understand what is found in them? Or might they as well be lost? When the book of the law is found, it causes great excitement. And it's immediately going to be brought into the presence of Josiah, and it's going to be read before him. And I want you to notice Josiah's response. Josiah, in verse number 11, says, when he heard the book of the law, he tore his clothes. Now, the tearing of the clothes was a sign of great or of deep emotion. It was a sign many times of grief or of pain, but it could also be a sign of anger and things of that nature. It's not anger here, but instead it is this deep emotion that he has heard the law for the first time, and for the very first time, Josiah realizes they've not been doing it right. They've not been fulfilling what God commanded. As a matter of fact, he says in verse 13, he says, go, inquire of the Lord for me, for the people, and for all Judah concerning the words of this book that has been found. For great is the wrath of the Lord that is aroused against us, because our fathers have not obeyed the words of this book to do according to all that is written concerning us. When Josiah hears what God's word says, he knows they have not been faithful to it. He knows they haven't done what they were supposed to do. He doesn't try to justify it. He doesn't try to explain it away, and he doesn't try to change it. Instead, what he tries to do is he tries to go to God to fix it. I have seen people over and over again through the years who look at the Bible and they say, I've never seen that before. When they actually read the Bible and see what God's word says, many times it's very different than what they've been told or what they've been led to believe. But there's many different ways that people respond to that. Some people see, well, I know this is different, but I'm going to go with what I've always heard. Some people try to pretend that they never heard what God's word says. They just want to duck their head and keep on going. Some get angry and defensive about the way that they've done things in the past. And some have the heart of Josiah, who when they hear what God's word says, it doesn't matter what they believed or what they thought was right in the past or what they'd been told in the past. Their only desire was to do what was right. What are our hearts saying about us when we hear God's word? Do we have the heart of Josiah? These are some of the things that I found in 2 Kings chapter 22. I hope that they're beneficial to us, not just in hearing them, but in taking them to heart. We're going to be taking a few days break in getting our videos up for the last couple chapters of the book because of my schedule. And so it'll be a little over a week before the next videos come up, but I hope that you'll join us then as we examine 2 Kings chapter 23. But until then, have a great day.